All right, well, good morning. I'm so happy to be with you here today. And I'm very happy that JR invited me down to be a part of this special event. He actually came and toured our school last fall. And I was really impressed with JR's passion for classical education, his desire and drive to make it happen, and his love for kids. And so I think that he is the perfect person to be working on making this classical education a reality here in Columbus. And I also just want to say thank you to you for coming today. I know that you have a lot of busy schedules and there are other things that you could be doing, but you came today to learn more about this Liberty Academy that will be opening this fall, which is so exciting. And I'm going to posit that this may be one of the most important events that you attend in all of 2023. And I know that's saying a lot, given it's only January 26th. Why do I say that? Because K-12 education is the playing field where the battle is on for the future of our country. It doesn't take too much engagement to realize that something seems off in our country right now. There's narcissism everywhere. There's increased anxiety and depression that has led to a huge spike in teenage suicides. There's a lack of hope and positivity just kind of generalized. And then we're seeing extremist and polarizing ideas that have become mainstream. So where are these cultural trends coming from? Where are they being incubated and perpetuated? The classroom. Starting with the universities, but now fully engaged in K-12 education. Ideas have consequences. You've heard that term before, that phrase before. Where else can you influence large numbers of people for 7 hours a day, day in, day out, for 7 or 5 days a week, for 13 years? It adds up to over 16,000 hours that kids spend in school, K-12. Compare that to how much time you might spend at church every week, or even how much time you might spend as a family, or even the 4 years of college. It's nothing compared to the 13 years. It is the most influential part of a person's life in terms of the number of hours they spend. So that being the case, we often think, well, they're just children. Could it really be that important? But children are like sponges. They absorb the world around them. Education is serious business. If we want our children to love music, what do? We go out and we buy them instruments. We sign them up for music lessons, and we tell them we want you to be in the band or the choir. And then if we want them to love sports, we sign them up for sports, sometimes all year long. And yet we still want to be able to make sure that they get the best instruments or the best sporting equipment, or they're on the best teams, or we're going to find the best instructors. We do this because we want to maximize the impact that these things are having for our children. So what do we want them to love learning? Do we just send them to any school and think that they're going to love learning and thrive? If we do, we're sorely mistaken. Why not give students the best opportunity to love learning and to maximize their impact in the world? Instruction that addresses the mind, but also the heart and the soul. What if we can provide them the best tools of learning, the best content for growing, and the best philosophy for maximizing that impact in the world? Classical education is that type of education. It addresses the heart, the soul, and the mind. And you might wonder how that can be. Well, it addresses the heart by teaching children respect and kindness, even while disagreeing with another person's ideas. We do this by emphasizing virtues such as honesty, integrity, and character, even in the context of learning multiple viewpoints through lively debate, discussion, and evaluation of ideas, so that students learn not only to be tolerant of other viewpoints, but then also to be able to defend their own. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is foundational to a true classical education. Classical education addresses the soul by teaching children that life is more than simply pursuing money, pleasure, or excellence for one's own selfish gain. Instead, it helps them understand the responsibility that they have for using their gifts and their talents and all of their learning for the betterment of society as a whole. The motivation for success doesn't change. It's the reason for wanting success that changes. It gives them a purpose beyond themselves. And classical education addresses the mind by providing a time-tested, comprehensive philosophy of education that coordinates beautifully with a child's natural progression of cognitive development. We often say we teach with the grain rather than against the grain. And classical education is divided into 3 stages of learning. The grammar stage in the elementary school, where we focus on tools of each subject. The logic phase in the middle school, where we focus on understanding of each subject. And the rhetoric phase, where we focus on application and communication at the high school level. So first I want to talk about the grammar stage. How many of you have heard the term grammar schools? Raise your hand if you've heard the term grammar schools. Goodness. And this is because classical education was the way that people were educated for centuries. It dates back all the way to Greco-Roman times, and it only has not been the norm in the US for about the last 80 to 100 years. The reason why you know the term grammar schools is because grammar is the first stage of learning. So elementary schools were just called grammar schools. So at that stage, we know that students memorize information very easily. If you have children, you know that they will watch the same movie over and over, they will read the same book over and over, and they never tire of it. So what do? We pack as much information as we can into songs, chants, rhymes, sound offs, things that they don't mind repeating over and over. And when you add actions to it, it makes it even more engaging for the kids. And they end up not even knowing that they're learning because they're having so much fun. So we can teach the kids the parts of speech through a song. We can teach them how to diagram sentences through a chant. We teach them the chemical elements through a song. Imagine being a high school chemistry student and having already learned your chemical elements when you're in elementary school. It frees your mind up to focus on what's really important at that age. Reading classics is an important part of all stages of a classical education. Why? Because they're time-tested, their content is excellent. And so what we also find is even in the lower school years at that grammar stage, if you use classic books and classic literature, they love to read. So often today, kids don't like reading. Well, if you're given just a basal reader or a textbook with a bunch of short stories that are really boring, I don't think we would enjoy reading either. And so what happens is when you give them this classical literature that is so much more interesting, they learn to love to read. This happened with my own 2 sons. I have 4 sons, but my 2 youngest were the ones that were able to attend our school because we opened after my older 2 were too old. But they were in 3rd and 4th grade, and they did not like reading when they came to our school. But within weeks of getting classic literature, I found them in their covers at night with flashlights trying to read because they loved it so much. It was a huge transformation. And then also, reading the classics at the high school level forms great fodder for discussion, which is so important. Latin is another important element of a classical education. Though Latin is a dead language, it lives on through many other languages. English is based 65% on Latin. So students who know Latin tend to perform much better on tests of vocabulary. They have better vocabularies. But then also because Latin isn't a word order dependent language, it's a more complex language to learn. Therefore, the students have to use their cognitive skills to be able to learn Latin. Thus, they tend to perform better on standardized tests in general because the reasoning skills that comes with learning Latin. And then history is another important element of classical education. We don't teach social studies, we teach history. And we start with ancient in 1st grade, medieval in 2nd, Renaissance in 3rd, and modern in 4th. And then we repeat that sequence in middle school and high school. And then we add our US history on top of all of that. And what's important about doing it that way is that the students then have pegs that they can help remember the information with. So many of us learned history kind of in a smattering, and it's hard to know and remember when things really happened. This gives them that timeline in their minds. We also use primary documents. The reason we do that is because we want the students to hear from the people themselves who lived during that time. Rather than a textbook that's written by authors who may have a bias, we'd rather hear directly from the people themselves. So those are some general concepts of classical education. I want to also talk about now the logic stage. The logic stage, students are becoming much more argumentative, and I think if anybody has had middle schoolers, they know that. And they want to know how, and they want to know why. So what do? We introduce them to research. The goal of the middle school years, as I said earlier, is understanding. So we give them research opportunities. They write their first research paper in 6th grade, and then they write one every year until they graduate. We do compare contrast exercises. We have them write from the perspective of literary and historical figures. All these things help them understand the topic that they're learning. We teach them logic. They get a formal logic class in 8th grade, and here they learn the art of argumentation. They learn what is a reasoned argument. They learn to recognize fallacies. And then we introduce them to debate in the 8th grade as well, so that they can begin practicing these things. And writing becomes extremely important in middle school. Classical education values writing because writing is a really important form of communication. And so we teach them the basics of writing in elementary school, but then in middle school and high school, we refine their skills. And so often today, whether that's public or private, what we see is students are being given plenty of opportunities to write, but they're not being taught how. And so what happens is they might get inventive spelling when they're little in elementary school. They might get the opportunity to write a lot of sweet little short stories that are creative and they're fun, but that's not teaching kids how to write. Consequently, we have college professors all over the country saying these students are woefully unprepared for writing. And this has been the case for a long time, by the way. So writing becomes very important with everything that we do here in classical education. And then at the rhetoric phase, students are becoming much more independent. They're starting to form their own opinions, and they're starting to separate from their families, which is healthy. We want them to do that. So now, not only do we want them to know the tools of each subject and understand each subject, but we want them to analyze and synthesize the information, form their own opinions, and then be able to communicate those opinions effectively and in a persuasive manner. We say that these high school years are the crown jewel of a classical education. It's what pulls everything together. Students who go all the way through a K-12 education in a classical school are amazing by the time they leave because they have that opportunity to take all of these skills and use them at the high school level. So now, how do we do this where they have the opportunity to analyze and synthesize? Well, we do a lot of debate and discussion in every class. And that's where fodder becomes so important. But they can practice developing reasoned arguments. They can practice recognizing poor arguments. And they challenge each other, just like the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. And it's a great opportunity for them to do that, but that's also how they develop respect for other people's opinions and how to handle their own views with grace. They also learn how to do, or they also take a formal rhetoric class, and that rhetoric class teaches them the canons of rhetoric all the way through, but then it culminates with a senior thesis. They write an 18 to 20 page senior thesis on a controversial topic. They boil it down into a 10-minute speech and they give it publicly. And there are 3 judges that are there who then question them for 10 minutes on their paper. This is something I did as a 25-year-old master's candidate, and these kids are doing this as 17 and 18-year-olds. It's truly amazing to watch. All in all, a classical education teaches kids how to think and how to learn, and they love it. That's one of the most important elements. What are the results? Well, students who go to classical schools across this nation tend to perform better than their peers on all measures of academic success. Our students at our school score in the top 13% of the nation on their ACT tests. And what we hear anecdotally from our students when they go off to college is that college is either the same level of difficulty or easier. So they are very well prepared. And importantly, they've developed confidence and they've developed respect, and they tend to be joyful people. And that's so important. We need that in our culture. What is the purpose of education? If we believe it's to educate the whole person, heart, soul, and mind, we must use methods, content, and philosophy that leads to that outcome. When we do, then we are giving children the best opportunity to love learning and be prepared for college and life beyond. That is classical education. We do this for music and sports. Why wouldn't we give them the best when it comes to their whole education? It's worth your investment. I'm going to leave you with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. He stated, "The philosophy of the classroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next." Let's support JR and his team and make Liberty Academy a tremendous success. Thank you.